I think one of the first things is you've got to assess where Poirier's at, right? I think if I remember right, Poirier has fought 10 times since the last time him and McGregor fought. So you've got some distance between the last time they fought and now. So where are we at mentally? That's going to be. I think that's the biggest thing because regardless of 10 fights between the last time and now, uh, is Poirier is his does he have a short memory when it comes to that stuff?
Hmm.
So that's the first thing when it comes to the game plan because it doesn't matter what you throw at him physically, where are we sitting mentally, right? So that's the first thing, and I think if you navigate through that, and let's just say Poirier is confident, looking and sounding and acting the way you would want him to, then you get into the punches and kicks and all that stuff. I think when you come straight to strategy, just punches and kicks, X's and O's, however you want to look at it. One of the biggest things is that Connor's been off for a year. He fought in January, and he only fought. It was a quick fight against Cerrone. I mean, I don't. I think it was less than a minute,
Hmm.
and so um, we haven't seen a ton of McGregor in the cage, and even prior to that. So, and what we have seen is that he's very explosive. He can knock you out, and he could do it early. The thing though that is impressive to me is that when you watched Poirier fight Gaethje, Gaethje is absolutely a different stylistic fighter than McGregor, but Poirier was able to finish him, and that's not easy to do. And so when I look at that fight, you go in there and you assess, okay, versus McGregor. His first couple rounds, he's always going to have dynamite in his left hand. We know that he's dynamic and he's able to kick well. So, what is the strategy? Well, I think the strategy there is to eliminate that left hand. And how do you do that? Well, I think a couple ways. Number one, Poirier can throw strikes like, for example, a right kick at that left hand and keep that left hand occupied. The other thing is we don't want to stay at range for a long time. I think cooking McGregor on the cage and putting him on the mat, whether he's getting up or not, that get up has shown in the past to wear out McGregor, and he loses power, and eventually he becomes susceptible to being taken down and put on the mat. So I think the biggest thing is you can't go out there and make a fancy fight with McGregor, especially in those first couple rounds, because his distance and range and power that's where his advantage is going to be. So I think you take that away from him right away, and you go and you get into that clinch, and you get into the groundwork, and Poirier is obviously really good on the ground. He's a black belt, and he's been a black belt for a while. And so I'm not saying Poirier can't strike with him. What I'm saying is in the first two rounds, you have to look at that fight in different clumps. So you got to look at the first two rounds because of McGregor's history. Then you got to look at three, and then you got to look at 4, 5. So three is kind of an assessment on what happens with 1, 2, and then 4, 5. He should be able to really run away with that fight given McGregor's past. Now, if McGregor shows up in the first second and he is looking like he's not fading like he has, or he's being efficient with what he's doing, then in the second or the third, we got to make an adjustment based on what we're seeing, and that comes from the corner and from the fighter. What is said fighter saying, and what's the corner saying? What adjustments do we need to make? So that strategy, I think when you go into strategy in a 5-round fight, you have to you have to look at it in chunks. It's not going to be the same strategy for all 5 rounds potentially. It might be, but there has to be some transitions or changes happening based on what's happening if it doesn't look the same. So, for example, if McGregor's keeping his range well and he's hitting Poirier well, then we have to have a strategy of blending or striking into our clinch or our takedown. And so somehow setting McGregor's feet, timing him, maybe counter wrestling him, those type of things. So that strategy has to be worked. It also has to be known that if the offensive strategy of striking into putting him against the cage or putting him on the mat isn't working, then we got to go to more of a drawing some stuff out of McGregor, which would be non-committal striking from Poirier, and then allowing Poirier to blend in and counter wrestle him and utilize it that way. So in that first round, there's going to be some assessment there. We got to go do our job and get that strategy going in the sense of putting him again on the cage and on the mat. And then I think Poirier, if that were to work in the first couple rounds, he didn't finish him, then Poirier can start to strike more with McGregor. Poirier is a great striker. It's just, let's take path of least resistance, especially at the beginning when everyone's fresh and explosive. And let's utilize where Poirier is better than McGregor, and it's on the ground. It's not about the rematch of the, well, it is, some of it's about the rematch, but most of it's about, did we lose our confidence because of the result of what happened versus McGregor for the next fight? So we have to figure that out. And fighters are really good at bluffing how they feel, because they're very type A, and they're in a good way, they're egotistical, and they don't want to show any kinks in their armor. And so as a coach, you have to be able to recognize that, and all the guys do it a little bit differently. And so you have to be able to recognize who you're dealing with and how what do they do when they have these insecurities. Well, I think Poirier has proven since McGregor that he was obviously beaten in that fight, in the battle, but he wasn't beaten in the war, because over his last 10 fights, he's really made a resurgence of who he is. So I would that where I'd first start I would explain to Poirier, hey, I want you to look at what you've done since then, and it's fueled a fire that you probably got reignited or fueled an even bigger fire that you had before you even fought McGregor. And you're just a different fighter now. Mentally, you're different. You fought in some huge fights since then. You've won some really big fights. You've beat guys that looked unbeatable. And so, we would draw from the past in order to help the future, in the sense of the McGregor rematch. And so, and then what did we learn from that? And not only from the coaching side, but, what did you learn from that, Poirier? What did you learn from that fight? And his reaction is going to really give us a roadmap of where he's at mentally. And so, the learning from that, and then also the what the coaching staff has learned from that, and then what his progression has been mentally, where he's at there. We're going to take all of that. We're going to use that to continue to build him up and allow him to, still believe and keep believing that he's the best in the world. And so, and respect what McGregor has, but not over respect him. I think when you have a rematch like that, you can't, if you give him too much respect, you'll let that train start going downhill. And so, you got to respect what he has, but at the end of the day, you're not going to fight Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor's coming to fight you. And I think that's the attitude that has to be had. Sometimes when you rematch and you're the loser on the rematch, sometimes I see fighters do this, whether they're mine or another camps fighters. I see them go into it where they are like, okay, I got to fight Conor McGregor again. And I feel like that's the wrong attitude, especially given what Poirier's done since then and how active he's been in comparison to McGregor. You know, the activity that he's had and the results he's had, he's coming to fight us. You know, he has to beat us. And so I think if you shift that mentality, that continues to help navigate those waters as we get into that Saturday night fight.